Hey everyone, welcome to Pandora's Soapbox. Today we're going to be talking about police reform because in the wake of George Floyd's death a couple months ago, many people, especially the Black Lives Matter movement, have called for the police to be defunded across the country. Which I will say, just a little bit of advice to BLM, maybe you shouldn't go riot and burn down entire cities and businesses that had nothing to do with Floyd's death when you're advocating for the police to be defunded and abolished. It's kind of a contradictory message. If anything, you should be showing how peaceful you can be without, you should show how peaceful you are as opposed to burning stuff down if you want to make a good case to why the police shouldn't exist. Because in reality, the riots have proved that, yes, the police are absolutely necessary to stop, said riots. But, the police there are a lot of problems with police. And so I'm going to give you two solutions that could greatly reform the police department. The first solution that can be applied to reform the police departments across the country is ending qualified immunity. That's like the legal principle that basically justifies anything a cop does on the job. It allows them to violate people's civil liberties and break a few laws here and there if it means that they catch bad guys. Like, for instance, that rule covers everything from letting cops run red lights to get to crime scenes faster, all the way up to killing people who may or may not be armed just because they look like they're threatening. It's a pretty broad legal principle. And it's not like the principle is badly intentioned. The intent of it is to make sure that cops can't be sued for what they do on the job, and that way they might be a little bit bolder when it comes to arresting people. That's all. But in application, as is the case with George Floyd, it doesn't always go very well. So I think if qualified immunity were eliminated, or if it was greatly scaled back, then maybe it would go better. Maybe cops would be less likely to kill people. And I will say though that far more whites and Hispanics are killed by cops than black people. But so I think it's kind of messed up with the media to make it a race issue when it's a police issue. This is an issue with the police, not race. Race has nothing to do with it. The second major police reform that could be passed, and I think this is the one I care most about, is ending public sector unions. Now, as pro-union as he was, even President Franklin Roosevelt decided not to legalize public unions. He thought that private unions were good to serve as a collective lobby for the workers to their bosses. But public sector unions, he feared, because when public unions go on strike the same way that private unions do, it's much more disruptive to the country because the public sector provides has a monopoly on certain essential services such as picking up trash or patrolling the streets as police officers or teaching students. They have a monopoly, or at least a near monopoly, on those services, and so when they go on strike, cities and governments can start to fail to function. So that means that they have insane lobbying power and can virtually hold the government hostage and get whatever they want. And unions in general, both private and public, tend to protect bad employees. My personal argument against unions in general is that if you're a good employee, you wouldn't need a union to protect you. But I digress. Well, not really, actually, because this is very important to police conduct. Bad police officers and corrupt cops, dirty cops, all that stuff, they're all protected by the unions. And it's incredibly difficult to fire a unionized worker, especially a public unionized worker. So if we just tossed out public sector unions, then plenty of dirty cops would find themselves no legal umbrella of protection. And especially if you severely curtailed with qualified immunity, you have plenty of cops that could be rounded up and imprisoned or fired for their poor conduct. And as a side note, this whole public union thing is why California and Illinois are routinely crippled by teacher strikes, because teachers' unions are pretty powerful. And again, they can hold the government hostage. So in conclusion, there are two big police reforms that could be passed that would prevent more George Floyd cases. Ending qualified immunity, because that means cops could be because that means we could prosecute cops for any civil liberties they violate. And 2, ending public unions so that city governments and unions cannot protect dirty cops. That's all for today, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe.